Welcome to Retro Skill Modelling. This is part 4 of Airfix's Avro Vulcan B.2, Scale 1 to 72. In part 3, I finished off building the cockpit with the airframe. In part 4, I'm going to be carrying on with the airframe as well as putting in the bomb bays. So let's get into this. To begin with, I'm making up the infrastructure for the bomb bay. The roof of it has various cross beams that have to be made up. There's 3 in total that have to be made up, and there's 2 already formed. Do each one individually because each one is slightly different. Now, there is a number stamp on each one as well. Keep that on. Don't be tempted to file that off because you will need that to make sure that you know where the placement is going to be when you're constructing them. Of course, you can't file them off and label them if you wish, but they're small, you won't notice them anyway. So I'd advise just to leave them on. This one is the larger section of the 3, and when you put the crossbeam in, there is a little lip running down the bottom piece that it just sits on. You shouldn't have any problem, just make sure it's flush to the edge when you put it on, and same with the other side. The back bulkhead here is going to be painted in Umbro 130 white satin. As we all know by now, white can be quite difficult to paint. This is why I've got primed it in white primer. This helps greatly while painting white. Like always, the key is very thin layers where you're placing this paint on. For the raised areas, it's Umbro 87 steel grey, and that's all the panels and so forth like that. I've no idea whether it's meant to have any colour on it, but it's good just to have a different colour to give it definition. The construction of the bay is fairly straightforward. You have to put in the 2 side panels first. I would recommend just having them in a dry fit situation first of all. I did try cementing them in place, but they kept on popping off each time I was putting in the cross beams in. Also, I didn't wait long enough for them to dry, but in the end that made putting the cross beams in that little bit easier anyway. So I would have them in this position just as a dry fit for now. So I'm going back to 87 steel grey for the raised areas on the other end of the bay here, and this just puts up into the smaller bit. Now the contact points are quite small on this, so again, like the other cross bulkhead there, either have it in a dry fit situation or wait until it's entirely dried before you place on the cross beam. So fitting the cross beams now these can be a little bit tricky getting in the correct position. Have a good look at the instructions before you do. Each one has its own little bay that it fits into. There's various location points and recess areas where each contour fits in, but it can be tight and you may need to apply a little bit of pressure just to get them fitted in. Wait until each one is dried before you move on to the next, because there's a chance that the one you put in will just pop out as you're trying to fit the next one in. So as you can see, I've just used an F-clamp there just to hold it in position to make sure it doesn't pop out. And I carried on that same method all the way down until all the cross beams were fitted. And once the beams were dried, it was time to refit the cross bulkheads and cement them into position. And now to extend the frame, there's various parts that you have to put on here. Each one does have its own location point, so you can't really get it wrong. Just beware of the angle of the back piece. It will make everything line up straight, but make sure you get each point in its proper location. This outer structure forms part of the main structure that's going to hold the wings in place. I'm also going to be building onto this structure, but that's quite an important structure to get right to hold the weight of your wings. Now, if you're worried about the weight of the wings, it's a common problem with the old Vulcan. I don't know about this one. I would recommend adding supporting joints to this. I'm not going to, because I'm adding on to the frame anyway, but put little cross sections into each joint just to give it that bit more structure to hold the wings in place. So once I have the cross section in, I put the back section on, line it up to the middle, then onto the bulkhead where the bomb bays are. As I said, it's quite important that you line this up properly, especially when you put it onto the wing as well. It will only fit in a certain way on the brackets on the wing, so try and make sure you get it done. I'm now adding parts to the airframe, scratch building them. The cross beams I'm placing in now, these are only temporary and will be moved on later on. This is just so it's not moving around too much. I will be using these parts again in roughly the same place, but for now they're just there to give me a little bit more structural support while I'm working on the frame. And once my supports are on, it's time to join the framework to the wings. Now, because I'm only having one wing on, I'm only going to be securing it to one wing. The frame sits on various location points on the wing, making up this sort of triangular shape. Make sure that each point is buttoned up against the contact point, and that the actual frame is sitting square and flat on the wing. This is quite important. If you flip it over just like I did there, you'll see that the bomb bay is lining up with the hard edge of the wing. Again, make sure that's all lined up before you move on to the next stage. Now I'm fitting this second part of the wing just as a temporary measure. There's two lips of plastic that run along the seam that will actually join the wing together if you're having the whole wing actual on. Now you can make the wing up before you put the framework on, of course, but I would suggest doing one half at a time. It's just easier to maneuver the plane around while you're trying to get it into position. I'm securing the unattached wing with some masking tape, and I'll use some clamps as well, just so that it doesn't move. The reason why I'm doing this, I need the surface area to extend the airframe, so I need to know where it's going to stop and start. It just saves from measuring and putting it on and finding out you may have got it too long or too wide, whatever your measurements are going to be. So this will act as a good template to add onto the frame. So now the first thing I have to do is extend the diagonal beam down. So I've taken two strips of plastic card, the two strips that I cut earlier on, to the length, to the height of the actual beam that's supplied with the kit. Now I'm putting one just above the contact point, so it's resting flat on the beam, and the inside one is going to be slightly shorter. This just gives it a good base for it to settle onto. It's also a good way to do it if your plastic card is too thin and you have to double up on the thickness anyway. So I'm doing the same again on this downwards beam here. Just putting one side on slightly above where the actual beam is, and the other inside one bumping up against it, resting on the cross beam. The next part I'm adding will close up the triangular shape, so I'm just taking a piece of plastic card and measuring it up to the point where I want it to meet the diagonal beam. And once I've got that measured, the actual tip of it is going to be extended to the edge of the wing. so that has to be curved off. So from the point where I measured where the diagonal beam's going to hit, I just done a circular line down it. As you can see, it goes straight to the edge. So that circular line down it, then I'll just cut off the excess, then sand it down so it's sweeping down to the wing. And that will form the main beam leading in at the back of the wing. So you always check for fit as well if you're doing this. It's very important to make sure it's all going to be the proper length. And once again, I'm using my pen drive to mark the holes inside the beam. So it's a pen drive, and then I'll be using my knife to place it in the pilot hole and just twisting it around and opening up the diameter of the hole. So once I'm satisfied with the beam, it's time to place it in. So it's running directly from my downright position, and it's going onto the diagonal beam, making sure that it's in line, just touching the cross beam there, and the sweeping end is pointing towards the edge of the wing, but not right to the edge, about 1 millimeter, 2 millimeters away from the actual edge of the wing. I'm now carrying on in that same vein and putting in the central parts first, just line them in that triangular section there, just lining them up. I'll be placing around 3 in this section alone. If I looked at the wing structure, and there's quite a lot of these beams. I'm not putting in as many as the illustrations in the picture shows. There's just too many to put in, so it's going to be a close approximation. So I think this is a good place to end part 4. In part 5, I'll be making up the compartments for the landing gears, for the front and the wing landing gear, before doing a little bit more framework. If you haven't done so already, why don't you check out the rest of this build on the channel, or indeed my other videos. Subscribe to the channel for notifications for this build, and of course for any future builds. Hit that like button, and of course leave a comment. But for now, thank you all very much for watching. Bye bye.